it's a consultancy Energy Star program. I have my own facility services consulting business. And through decades of experience, hopefully you will gain one or two nuggets here today. And the start is really going to be just to lay a foundation. I mean, many of you are probably familiar with Energy Star and Portfolio Manager, but I am going to start with a high-level overview in case any of you aren't, and we'll kind of maybe take a different angle on it than you've heard in the past. You know, I'm going to talk to just Portfolio Manager, how to align it with sales, both goals and processes, and then, you know, help you kind of understand where you're at versus maybe where you need to be as an expert with Portfolio Manager to sell effectively. And then I'm going to wrap up with some real practical kind of nuts and bolts tips that I've learned over the years that may help you as you engage your customers with Portfolio Manager. So starting out, and there is a poll, but as you join, please go ahead and answer that poll. We'll share the results here soon enough. But just starting out, the base of the Energy Star program, where it all began, is the development of a 1 to 100 score. It really is a great, simple way to communicate the energy efficiency of a commercial building. There's certainly some different data that goes into developing that score, but ultimately the output is a very straightforward metric. And if you get a 75 or above, a building is eligible to be Energy Star certified and get some recognition, including a label and the option of a plaque to go along with it. There are lots of property types that can get the Energy Star score. You see those listed here. Certainly, all of these building types, there are thousands of them in Portfolio Manager that have received a score. Some of them don't get a certification, but for the most part, they all are also eligible for certification. But I will say that as a salesperson, one of the things that I really like about Portfolio Manager is that it works for all buildings, right? So there are certain specific buildings that can get a score, but it really applies to any building in the marketplace because it also produces an energy use intensity. And so that's important because when you're going into a sales process, there are some ins and outs of building performance and just the way buildings are laid out, and maybe have some shared spaces, it maybe has some different parameters around occupancy and things of that nature that you don't necessarily know when you step foot in the building or you call on a facility manager or a property manager or an owner whether or not their building qualifies to get a score. You can generally maybe know that by the type of building, but you always have the backup of an EUI in case the building doesn't qualify for a score. And that's important because it means that you can integrate Energy Star into your sales process for every building that you're calling on, or every customer that you're meeting with. Because ultimately what you see here is that both for all buildings, Energy Star provides weather normalization, and yes, for a score, you qualify for certification, and there's some normalization for operations. But for both an EUI and a score, there's going to be some trend analysis, both weather normalized and non-weather normalized, and then ultimately either option is going to be effective for energy management. And the tool we're talking about with Energy Star today is Portfolio Manager. This is kind of your base level energy analytics tool, and it's free through the Energy Star program. So it does a lot for a little, or actually a lot for nothing. It does require some of your time and some of your education, but ultimately you can deliver a pretty robust energy analysis of a building without any cost. So that's whole building energy and water consumption. You can track green power. You can do reporting, GHG emissions, water waste, and of course, ultimately apply for certification for buildings that qualify. So we're going to talk about how you integrate this tool into your sales process. And certainly when you're thinking about sales, having something shiny or having something meaningful to kind of share and summarize is really important. And I like to go back to this Energy Star Progress and Goals report. It's one of the standard reports that comes out of Portfolio Manager, and you can, as soon as you create an account, you can go find this report for the sample office that's in Portfolio Manager. And I'm going to drill down one more layer here just so you can see some of these metrics closer. So this is the bottom of that report. You see on the left there's a progress section, on the right there's a performance goals section. So what you are able to provide a client here is a very rich data set, right? So we're talking about you put in some basic parameters of the building, you put in 12 months of energy use, and ideally even more history than that, and you come out with all of this that you're seeing here, the ability to set and track towards the national median, towards specific property targets, toward a score of Energy Star 75 and certification. And so this is the conversation you can have with the client. I mean, certainly a lot of clients like to start with the conversation around what their building is costing them. So if you go down under progress, so we look at, these initial ending dates, we'll call it 12/31/19. That building is spending almost $550K on energy. Well, it's a very simple conversation to have with the client after you set up their Portfolio Manager account to say, client, we know just based on your capabilities, team's capabilities, the equipment in this building, position it however you want, but there is an opportunity for your building to at least get to the national median of a 50. If you were to do that, that is going to save you $120,000 a year. And if you were to get to a 75, wow, that goes up significantly. Now you're looking at $250,000 a year in savings. So just being able to kind of have that conversation and position yourself as a solution provider to just really open up that budget conversation right there from the start, because you know that there's some opportunity for savings that can potentially pay for themselves. So that's a great way to start. You can also do the same thing looking at the energy use intensity as well as the greenhouse gas emissions through this on report. So also just important to note that Energy Star works for industrial facilities as well. So important that, Portfolio Manager covers kind of your commercial and institutional buildings. Outside of Portfolio Manager, on the industrial page of the Energy Star website, you have energy performance indicators, or EPIs, that are made available via spreadsheets for certain industries that Energy Star has partnered with to develop these. So I just want to make a point of this because, if you're in sales and you're selling to all kinds of different facilities, it helps to know that Energy Star has something to offer for really any facility out there, even the big industrial plants. So what? Who cares? So that's what I would say if I was a salesperson. I want to know how this is going to help me really drive better sales. So that's what we'll get into next. And while we're transitioning, Alex, I'm going to share the results of that first poll. I'm going to talk. So it seems like there are a handful of you who have benchmarked a building in Portfolio Manager in the past 3 years. So that's good. So this should be hopefully building on that experience some. So as we get into Portfolio Manager and project development, I want to start with a case study. So this is a contractor that I worked with out in Denver that really were looking at focusing on positioning themselves as a trusted energy advisor. They didn't want to be just bidding on every little project that was going to the lowest number. They really wanted to be engaged with clients and prospects about the energy performance of their building and show their expertise and position them to do higher margin work. So I came across this case study when I worked for an Energy Star partner called EnergyPrint. So we were their energy analytics partner that included the Energy Star score in our services. And I worked with this company, and they were it's a small business, so this is big numbers for their small business. By just benchmarking buildings and getting started with conversations around energy, they added almost $2 million in projects in less than 2 years. They opened a new division really focused on doing this type of work for offices specifically. And they were able to report back to their clients that they had saved them almost $800,000 in the course of those 2 years. So really we're able to see a lot of great results around the approach that I'm going to share with you now. And that approach really is 5 kind of different things that I'll touch on here. One is around just positioning yourself as a trusted advisor. To me, the thing that always builds trust faster than anything is action, right? So anyone can talk a big game, but if you are able to show your clients firsthand that you are going to deliver, that you are going to be consistent, that you are going to communicate well, that you're going to follow through, it goes a long way to build trust. And a great way to do all those things is to just find a small project that you can work on with a client before they even pay you anything, right? So that's what benchmarking can be for you. It can be a great just way to get started with a client, just to, hey, here's something that we can do together that I think would help us get to know each other. It'll help us get to know your building and give us some idea of whether or not we can really help you. It also is going to demonstrate that energy is an important thing, that you care about your client's cost. And, you know, you will be able to differentiate yourself because correctly benchmarking a building provides a level of expertise that your client probably isn't used to hearing from some of your competitors. So as you go through this whole process, it's really an opportunity to build trust and provide advice with your clients and position yourself as this trusted advisor. And in that process, a great benefit of it is you are going to be able to facilitate goal setting. So, I mean, just to have a goal setting tool baked into your sales process, it's really powerful, right? Everyone wants to kind of achieve those mountaintop moments with their clients, but you can't get there unless you, set the goal to get to that mountaintop. And so as you're kind of getting to know this client, as you're doing this initial project with them, you can start to talk to them about how they want to use this new benchmark that you set up with them to set goals, whether it's to be at a 50, which is the national average, or 75 to track eligibility for certification. You can even look at it 5% change. Say you just want to get 10% better or 5% better. But really, this is going to help you tether or tie yourself to your client and their goals. And how many of you have experienced, the clients that talks about doing projects, talks about doing initiatives, but just really never gets around to it? A great way to solve that challenge in some circumstances is goal setting, because goal setting in many cases is what leads to better motivation, more focused effort. And ultimately, you're going to discover more opportunities. I'll tell you that benchmarking is a key approach to a salesperson that really knows how to move the conversation to the whole building. You may get called into a building because something's broke here, or something's, something seems like it's not running correctly, or there seems to be an issue here or there. And certainly you need to perform and service that equipment or fix that problem. But if you can steer that conversation towards benchmarking, you're really going to move the conversation from that specific kind of break fix issue, or maybe replacing that specific unit, to what is the deal with this whole building? Like, how is it really at a higher level, at a whole building performance doing? And then you're going to engage the customer in a better conversation about solving the systematic issues, or the maybe the cultural issues with that building, with that team, that need to take the building from a score, say a 40 to a 50, or maybe it's from a 60 to a 90, or from a 10 to a 30, whatever it is. You're really setting yourself apart and making yourself a part of the conversation to think about the larger picture and what more opportunities might exist across that entire facility for improvement. More opportunities also come from just, again, establishing that trusted advisor role. How many of you have experienced, just over the course of getting to know a client or a new prospect, that 3 months, 6 months into the relationship, they're telling you something that you thought they should have told you on day one, but they just didn't really trust you. So anything that you're able to do to kind of build that trust faster, and like I mentioned earlier, getting a benchmarking project done off the jump is going to kind of help with building that trust. You know, it's going to open up, it's going to cause them to be more transparent, and additional opportunities and issues with that building are going to come to light. You know, if you're in sales or in a relationship business, you're really looking to develop strong relationships and build trust. And, you know, people don't like to, oftentimes it's said that people buy you, right? They buy into the person that's representing the company and what they're offering and how they're approaching things. And relationships take time to develop. So the beautiful thing about energy benchmarking is that utility bills come every month. Right, so when you commit to helping a client with their benchmarking effort, you are certainly starting with 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 years of historical data, but then you have the opportunity to help them keep that data current, keep it up to date, establish a regular rhythm of discussing changes in that score with them, and if you've helped them set goals and determine plans, you can revisit those with them. All of this is really fostering a stronger relationship over time, because again, you show up consistently, you show up with new information, you add value on an ongoing basis, you are going to deepen that client relationship. And then ultimately, you know, what you're looking for and what you're building to is a winning or negotiated work, right? A great way to win negotiated work is to provide value up front. Build more trust, hold your price, hold your value. Owners will bid out work to contractors, but not to partners, and you can really use the portfolio manager and the benchmarking process to establish a relationship and establish you as the partner that really wants to help the client improve their building and achieve their goals over time. So let's just hypothetically say this is exciting to you, right? So you like what you're hearing, you think there's an opportunity to maybe do more with portfolio manager in your sales process. Well, you know, no one likes someone in sales who isn't genuine, right? So if you're going to use this tool, be an expert. So, and there are great resources within Energy Star to do that. And hey, I know no one likes to come to a training and hear, hey, you need to take these other 5 trainings. But I do think that, you know, if you make the decision to become an expert in portfolio manager, there really are some good opportunities to do that through the Energy Star training pages. There's an overview. We've got 101, 201, 301, applying for Energy Star certification. And Energy Star makes it really easy to get through these. I mean, they have self-guided versions, they have recorded versions, they have live versions. So pick and choose what works best for you. But I would encourage you to increase the depth of your knowledge because, again, this is really where you set yourself apart, is not just in benchmarking a building, but getting it right and explaining to a client how you got it right, what you did to make sure that they got a quality result and high value in their interaction with you. Another great best practice in becoming an expert is to benchmark your own office. Now, that might mean different things to different people. Maybe you're in a branch office, maybe that you don't own, maybe you're in a leased space. I mean this pretty broadly. I would just say, you know, find an office that's easy for you to benchmark, that you somehow have access to. It might even be just a client that you're really close to already. And this can just help you learn to navigate Portfolio Manager, understand the process of getting utility data. I mean, ideally, you get multiple years of utility data to start the benchmarking process. And then you're also going to figure out how to get data from utilities. You know, ideally, you get the data directly from the utility, both the historical and then ongoing monthly updates. But utility processes can be challenging at times, and different utilities have different accounts. If you have multiple utilities serving the building, and working through all that is important on your own before you try and do it for a customer. And ideally, you're going to generate some stories. You know, people love to hear stories. They love to hear you tell about a service, not just pitch it. So ideally, you generate some stories and have some reports that come out of that. that you can also share as well as examples. And then the kind of progressive iteration of all this is to start building some customer buildings, start benchmarking some customer buildings. I would leverage relationships that you already have to help with the learning curve. And maybe you're in sales and you're at a new company and you don't have any relationships. Maybe go to somebody on the account team or somebody else on the sales team that has some existing relationships where you can start. And again, you know, you're going to interact with some different building types. You're going to interact with some different utilities. The experience is going to vary a little bit. And the idea of getting kind of 5 to 6 buildings under your belt is that you feel comfortable with a range of different benchmarking experiences. And ideally, you have some formal or even informal case studies. I mean, I love the informal case study. You just, you know, put together a couple of different bullets for an email, a follow-up email or something that explains some of your experience and some of the results. And that can be a great way to share benchmarking with a prospective customer. You know, I've touched on it a little bit, but just to kind of dive into it a little bit deeper, you know, getting complete and accurate utility data is important. So Portfolio Manager requires 12 months of utility data for all fuel types, and water is also optional. You can also do waste. But getting complete and accurate utility data really sets you apart, because a lot of the data that when people do portfolio benchmarking themselves, they're not really all that familiar with facilities, with utilities. You know, that data can end up being either typed incorrectly because there are a lot of charges and a lot of different metrics on a bill. So I would just say focusing on this is important. You'll find that deregulated states maybe have a little more complexity in the types of bills and number of bills you get for a building. So it's even more important if you're in a deregulated market. Be wary of customers providing you data in spreadsheets. This is where kind of typos and different translation of different units can cause issues. Look at the utility authorization forms. Make sure you understand all the signatures you get. You don't want to walk into a client and have the opportunity to have them sign off on a form, but not to have the form or not to get the right person to sign off on it. So understand kind of what authorization forms utilities might have that help you get utility data quickly and effectively. Ideally, you know, you're getting online access set up, so if the customer has online access, asking that question, and you know, some utilities will allow third parties to set up their own online credentials. A lot of them aren't that sophisticated, so asking the customer for their online credentials is maybe a way to go. And then knowing which utilities automatically import data to Portfolio Manager. There are a number of utilities across the country that will actually import the data through to Portfolio Manager directly, and you can set that up in the tool. So knowing how to do that and being aware of it is important. So now we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of actually completing the benchmarking process. I'll just share some of what I have experienced in the course of benchmarking buildings. And yeah, I'll just jump into this. So first off, just a handful of steps that I'm going to walk you through. If you're in sales, a lot of these will kind of resonate, but I do just want to kind of translate some key sales concepts into actually Portfolio Manager specifically. For starters, you got to establish the need, right? So any good salesperson is only as good as the questions they ask. So here's where you want to just learn about the building, learn about what the customer knows about their utility usage. These are some questions that I've used and have found to be effective, but certainly feel free to develop your own. I am always surprised that owners, facility managers really can't guess, a lot of times within a few $1,000s, maybe even tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, what their utility costs are. Certainly, many have not analyzed how their building performs on a weather normalized basis. You know, ask a question about, you know, how do you think your building performed this summer versus the previous summer? You get a lot of blank stares. You know, so there's some other questions in there as well. I think, you know, have you completed any energy savings projects? Typically the answer is yes, and then if you follow that with have you received the energy reductions that you expected? They might say yes as well, but then if you follow up with, well, how do you know that? They don't really know that. They're really guessing. They're not really actually tracking it. They don't, they're spending money to improve the energy performance of their building, perhaps, but they're not really maintaining any sort of accountability for those results. So if you're asking these questions and other maybe similar questions, what you may help a client do is figure out that they have some serious gaps in terms of a huge operating expense that they should have some better insight and accountability for. Now, you don't want to tell them that directly, but if you ask them the questions, hopefully they start to realize that. And then one of the questions that you can kind of end that conversation with is, well, have you heard of portfolio management? And they may or they may not have. What do you know about it? Is a good question to follow up on if they have. This would be an opportunity to address any misconceptions. I mean, I find that if somebody does know what portfolio manager is, their definition of what it is and what it does is often wrong, right? A lot of people think, for instance, that all the buildings that are entered into portfolio manager are what you are benchmarking against. That is not true. There is no way that that can work because we don't have any kind of parameters around or data validation around data that gets put into the tool. What actually happens is there's a national survey or multiple different surveys that are used to establish the benchmark and compare buildings against. And that's a whole detailed process that's documented on the website that I won't get into right now, but that's just an example of a misconception that you can address. Then you want to get into, you know, describing the tool, so give them an accurate picture of what it is and maybe how you've used it to help clients. And then my best just option for educating a client is really showing versus telling. So if you have some sample copies of reports, you could do that. You could actually log into Portfolio Manager. But probably the number one thing I would say is just, hey, can we get started benchmarking your building? I'd love to show you how this tool works. We're not going to charge you. We're just going to help you kind of get a virtual building set up and review the results so that you can kind of understand where your building stands from energy performance. And we'd love to do it because it helps us get familiar with your building and understand whether or not we can really help you as a partner. So that might be some language that you could use there. And just maybe stepping up a little more big picture. So there are a number of different needs that you might establish in the course of this conversation. They may just not even know anything about Portfolio Manager, or they may have an incomplete understanding of it, so your role may be education. They might have benchmarked their building, but they're not updating it monthly. The utility data, they haven't updated any of the operating characteristics, or what's often called space attributes. So really they need maybe somebody to roll up their sleeves and kind of help them kind of get their building to where it needs to be. They might be benchmarking incorrectly. So if you're really the expert that you've educated yourself on, that's something you might be identifying, be able to identify by just looking at their account briefly. They might not be using the goal setting feature. Let me take that back. They more than likely are not using the goal setting feature. They're probably not producing any reports on a regular basis, and they may not even know that utilities provide data directly to the tool. So maybe your role is going to be providing direction and kind of helping them get oriented correctly. And if you do all those things, right, if you're in there educating, supporting, and directing, that's what opens up the opportunity for the last wing solutions. You know, those are some real simple things you can do that help build trust, that help show your expertise, and then ultimately can lead to an energy audit or facilities assessment, or maybe doing certification or any other type of energy conservation measure. Okay, so in your conversations, as you're talking about Portfolio Manager, here are just some key benefits that I think are important to highlight. You know, we talked about that people typically aren't weather normalizing their data. They typically don't have any peers to compare against as well. and they're not looking closely at historical trends. So just understanding relative energy performance from a number of different angles is important. You know, energy is an indicator of an overall building performance, right? So energy efficiency is important, but just really system efficiency and reliability is important as well, right? So there's that angle. If a client really isn't buying into the whole energy efficiency message, which would be unfortunate, I would go bigger picture and just say, well, how do you know that your building is even a high-performing system, right? A waste of energy is an indication of a low-performing system. Certainly then the qualification for ENERGY STAR certification is very unique and very beneficial. Tracking improvements from energy efficiency measures, again, there's typically not a lot of accountability around money and capital dollars that are put into changes. And then the brand, the ENERGY STAR brand, whether it's engaging, you know, the customer that you're trying to sell to, or engaging the staff on that building, the ENERGY STAR brand and benchmarking the building with the ENERGY STAR portfolio manager is a great way to kind of engage people, because they do recognize that it's a trusted source of information. One just kind of pitfall to avoid, let's just say you've gotten a client excited about ENERGY STAR portfolio manager. You did your kind of needs analysis. They realize that there's some gaps in what they should know and understand about their building. You talked to them a little bit about portfolio manager. You said, hey, why don't we get started on your building? They said, man, that's a great idea. I'd love to do that. Before you go forward, get their buy-in on the work that's going to be required for them, because you can't set up their building without them, and you don't want to walk out of that meeting or that phone call or that Zoom leading them to believe that you're going to come back in 2 weeks, 1 week, and provide them an energy benchmark without any effort from them, right? So get their buy-in, make sure they understand, hey, great that we're going to get started on your benchmarking. There are some things that I'm going to need from you. Let me go through them, and let's talk about when you feel like you'll have time to do this, and we'll set up a follow-up to deliver your benchmark maybe 2 weeks after we've gotten everything from you, or a week after we've gotten everything from you. Because you do need the client's help to get the property use details and energy consumption, and you also want to make sure that they're going to be available to review the reports that you develop, right? You don't want to spend a lot of time developing this benchmark and then you can't find them when you've got the results. And that can be avoided by just setting the right expectations. And then, you know, I would just say, you know, you and your team are going to invest some time in this. More than likely, you're not going to charge for it. I would recommend for a prospect that you don't. But this is an investment of your time, and maybe even quote them a price saying, here's what we would typically charge if we were charging for the service, because that helps to kind of put some parameters around the value of what you're doing. And you may even want to ask the client to sign off on something. If this is a client that, or a prospect that maybe you have some experience with and you are concerned about their follow-through, that could be an opportunity to just have, hey, we have a basic statement of work that we just make sure that we have you sign off on so you understand what we need of you, what we're asking of you, what we're going to do. That can be a good way to kind of make sure and establish some good boundaries around what this is and what it is. Then you're going to want to make sure that you follow through, right? And you've all had a meeting with a prospective client where a lot of great things get discussed, but then there's no follow through. A couple of tips for that. You know, if you're going on site to meet with the client and talk about benchmarking, there might be some things that you can just accomplish and get started with right at the end of that meeting. So say you've set up a meeting for an hour, and 35 minutes in, you've decided that you're going to benchmark the building. Well, say, hey, let's get started. Let's go find the utility bills. Let's go talk to the accounting department and see if they have copies. Let's go, you know, if you're in an office, you got to there's an input that's the number of PCs. Well, let's just kind of walk the handful of floors of this building and get a sense of how many PCs we can estimate that for the whole building. So there's some things you can do to just kind of get things rolling while you're there with the client. I would just say a good follow-up email, really outlining, hey, here's what we discussed. here's what we have on your building so far, here's what's missing in order to get this process complete. And then as much as you can, work directly with the people, the accounting, the utility, to get bills. Sometimes that can be great if your contact is maybe a high-level executive property manager overseeing 50 properties. The more that you can kind of take off their plate, I think that can also move the process forward. And then I love to just, book a meeting from a meeting, right? So if you're there meeting with them, talking about benchmarking, go ahead and get a meeting on the calendar a month out to review the results. Because that can be a built-in deadline and something to work against that can work to your benefit. And so these are the results that you're going to review. We went through these earlier, but I just wanted to bring them back up because I think this can be a really rich conversation to have with a prospect. You've sat down with them, you've established that they need to better understand their building's energy performance, and then you have this to review with them on their next meeting. So that's kind of just the sales process I wanted to walk you all through. Got a couple more minutes here, and I'm going to go through some common objectives. And while I'm doing that, Alice, if you want to launch the next poll question, we can have people go ahead and respond to that while I'm going through this section. So this is just kind of to understand, talked about earlier, what the Energy Star score is versus what an EUI is. So interested to know what % of your customers are currently using Energy Star. Always interested in just kind of understanding what level of experience your business has with our tools. So a handful of common objectives. So you get to meet with this client and you are thinking that your big sales pitch is going to be getting them to benchmark with Portfolio Manager as a way to kind of establish your initial relationship with them. And they say, well, we're already using Portfolio Manager. That's actually good news, and let me tell you why. This is ultimately what you want, is you want them to have good energy analytics information that you can work with them on. So I think it's just the conversation then becomes digging into how did they get that benchmark, themselves or with someone else? Are they able to get a score or an EUI? Again, this is where you're showing that you know your expertise and you know that tool well. Are they goal setting? Is their current score up to date? So there's some questions here that can also help uncover whether or not they're really using the tool effectively. Just because they have a Portfolio Manager account doesn't mean they're using it effectively. So your goal is really to learn more about the client, what they're doing for energy benchmarking, and how you can best partner with them. And if you do that, you can still be a good partner with them, even if they already have a Portfolio Manager account set up. You just want to understand where they're at with it and come along and help them make sure they're using that information, make sure they're willing to provide you access to that information so that you can, again, help kind of them with goal setting and achieving those goals. You are more likely to encounter this with large national clients. A lot of these customers, or a lot of these big real estate companies already have corporate policies to benchmark all of their buildings in Portfolio Manager, so just a heads up on that. We recently completed an audit or assessment. So this can be a way that they want to shut down your conversation about energy efficiency and energy benchmarking. We've got this, we did this, we paid somebody to do this. Well, again, I would dig more into that and try to understand what they mean by that. Was it completed recently? What were some of the findings? Was the energy benchmark a part of the process? So a lot of questions along those lines, and then ultimately, would they mind sharing a copy of the report with you? These types of reports are done often, and a lot of times they sit on a shelf and nobody does anything with them, right? Because the person who did the report wasn't really good at follow through, wasn't really good at kind of doing the types of things we're talking about today in terms of, benchmarking and establishing an ongoing kind of relationship of consulting and becoming a trusted advisor. So you can actually build upon that work in some scenarios. You might also find that they have a software product or an energy analytics tool that already does their benchmarking. That can happen because Energy Star does partner with a lot of software companies / data analytics companies to exchange data with Portfolio Manager. Typically, it's used by companies with larger portfolios of buildings. But again, back to what we've talked to before, this is not a bad thing, right? Just ask questions to understand how they're using that data, how they're getting it. You may want to specifically review their Portfolio Manager account for accurate property details, because a lot of times when benchmarking is done for these large portfolios of buildings, those property details might be estimated, or they're certainly not updated on an ongoing basis the way they possibly should be. So again, figuring out kind of what the situation is with benchmarking, using your expertise to fill in those gaps and partner with that company is really the goal. I already know my building is performing at peak energy efficiency. So you will hear this a lot of times with newer buildings. So I think one place to start is if they haven't benchmarked their building in Energy Star yet, would they like to get it certified? Because if they have a newer fancy building, maybe they like to get those recognition things for it. So Energy Star certification could be a great point of engagement for them. Do they plan on applying for any other green designation? So there are a number of different green initiatives out there that use Energy Star as the energy portion of their kind of more larger sustainability tracking or designation. So this is just a great way to meet the client, their point of interest. I wouldn't try to argue with a client, right, because you and I both know, if you've been around buildings, sometimes these new fancy buildings, the people who think they're performing great actually aren't. So trying to argue with somebody about that can sometimes be a conversation that doesn't go very far and gets shut down pretty quickly. So I would just meet these clients at their point of interest, right? If they think they have a great building, okay, well, hey, let us help you with your great building. Let us help you get it certified. Let us help you do these other sustainable or green designations. And maybe in the process of doing that, they find out that they actually don't qualify for certification, or that their building has some work before they can hit the green designation if they'd like. And if you handle that conversation well, you'll be a great partner for them to help take them to that next level. Okay, I'll just go ahead and shut down that poll, and I am wrapped up. That was my last slide, so we're going to move into some Q&A now. Feel free to chat your questions, and I will be on here for a few